Platform. Today I'll be showcasing the abilities of the platform as well as showing you some different examples. So for starters, what is Juggernaut? Juggernaut allows you to create these reusable workflow templates that you can be confident in because it allows you to take a large complex problem, break it down into smaller subproblems, leverage a combination of multiple large language models, third-party tools, and in the end you get an answer and a result that you can be very confident in because over the span of this workflow it's able to build upon the information, the research, the insights that it's gathering, and in the end give you a final answer or output that has a lot of thought put into it. So there are many different types of workflows or things that you can build with Juggernaut, but today I'm going to be showcasing two different examples. One being a example for education, another being a business use case, maybe for a sales or marketing team doing research on particular companies. So our first example. So this is called Lesson Plan Generator. It was made in collaboration with a few different teachers. And what it's made to do is to, help students who are struggling with a particular subject, whether it's reading, math, apply, teaching methodology that the teacher wants to use and create a rich, in-depth plan for that student to learn, as well as the content that they can use to learn. So the way that these workflows work is that they're inputs and outputs. This particular workflow has, subject, education level, focus, teaching methodology, and student interest. Then over, various different tasks, we are generating the information about that course. We're learning about, and learning and expanding about what the user's intent was, creating a course outline, and eventually creating the course content. So I'll dive into a few of these different tasks just so you can get a feel of the platform. The first thing we're doing is we're generating text. So this particular, workflow or this task, we're generating something called learning intent analysis. We're using Gemini 2.5, but you can use various other models from GPT 5.5 to Claude and Gemini. So many different model providers that you can choose from. The benefit of this being you can mix and match to optimize on cost. Certain models are better at certain tasks than others. So that flexibility gives you a lot of options. After we do this, we can then define our prompts. I'll be diving into this shortly, as well as set other settings such as our temperature. We can allow for our model to search the web. We can also attach agentic tools. So this is something I'll be doing a deeper dive on later as well, but this gives the large language model the ability to do some tool executions as a part of its final answer. So that was an example of text generation. After I generate my learning intent, I then generate a learning outline and the course material. But before we dive into that, let's do a deeper dive on the prompt that was used to generate the learning intent. So what you're seeing here is called the prompt editor, and it allows us to create these prompt templates. We can provide our instructions as well as point to these variables that are attached to the workflow. So for instance, subject, education level, focus, these are the inputs that are going into our process. So we're able to create our learning objective using these inputs. So after we do that, we generate something called learning outline. But I think it's more beneficial to skip this step and show um, what structured outputs look like. So here we're generating something called course, and we're using Gemini 2.5 again. But instead of generating text, we're generating structured output with um, a list of chapters. Each chapter, we're just defining the name, the overview, the objective, you know, the number of hours, and an assessment related to that chapter. After I generate this chapter, I then want to generate the actual course content. So my next step, I'm doing a special kind of task. I'm using DeepSeek chat, and instead of this task just repeating once and generating all the chapter content at once, it's going to individually do this. That way the model can hyper focus, and I can be confident that it's generating a rich amount of content for each chapter. So the cool thing about Juggernaut is that you can use references to determine how many times this workflow or this task is going to repeat. And in this case, it's linked to course chapters and the size of that collection. So we use course.chapters.length, and if there are 10 different chapters that are generated or chapter outlines, it will repeat 10 different times. In addition to that, we're able to create a template and reflect, kind of our goal of generating individual chapters. So, not only being able to reference the inputs that were passed in, but also the outputs of previous steps. So, outline is something that was generated in a previous task. We're able to include that here. And this is where things get interesting. We're able to use this special operator on our prompt called step loop, and it'll only pull in the relevant course chapter so that we can generate content just for that chapter. Going back to our workflow, we do generate something called parent guide and homeschool guide. These are just some additional materials for the parents to use to help their students. But obviously, I'm not a student. I wanted to test this workflow out, so I just gave it my own type of inputs, and I wanted to learn about trading futures. So the cool thing about this is there's a central place where you can view all of your results for the processes that you run. And for here, I generated something called Trading Futures for Dummies. As I mentioned, each workflow has multiple different outputs. So for instance, this course generated 5 different chapter outlines, and also 5 different chapter content sections. So each section goes into a lot of depth. It follows the course outlines, the objectives, the goals of that. But obviously, this is great. This isn't the best way to consume this information, right? We have all the information here, but if we wanted to make it something digestible, there'd probably be a lot more work that we need to do to actually make it usable. So in Juggernaut, we don't just leave you hanging like that. We allow you to create what's called a process-driven application. And this is the ability to create a interactive experience, and in this case, it's an educational book, right? So all of my chapters are organized in a very structured way. I know, if I want to go to chapter 2, I can do so. All my content is here. It's a lot easier for me to read and digest. I can get a sense of how to trade futures. just because everything is broken down into different chapters. We also have an assessments, objectives that are generated. So this is just a small example of what we call a process-driven application, right? Not just a bunch of static text, but something interactive that I can come back to and use, right?